Thank you so much for coming. We have had a really interesting, stimulating, inspiring symposium. So many voices have been heard from around the world, from various religious traditions, from various outlooks and spiritualities, and a variety of demonstrations of wonderful expertise. You have to stop and think for a minute just what high-quality experts we have, and the whole group coming together with their different viewpoints and their different abilities and talents has made this symposium extremely interesting. My name is Gary Doxey. I am an associate, I have to look at my title. I am an associate director of the International Center for Law and Religion Studies, and I'm just delighted. I've been part of this program for many, many years, and every year it brings something new to me, and that is very much because of you. We want to begin this session by giving a few thank yous. We want to provide first, or mention first, special thanks to our student volunteers. So many of them. Especially we like to thank the executive committee of students who've worked tirelessly for a number of weeks to plan and carry out the many logistical aspects of the conference. We also want to mention in a special way the stellar help of students from BYU Hawaii who have traveled here to help us. And we know that most of them are behind the scenes, or they're not with us now. Some of them have had to go off to different areas of service, but we would ask the students who are with us if they could please stand to be acknowledged. I often think the students at BYU are the secret weapon of the success of this symposium. We want to thank also the interpreters. There are about 50 different interpreters, interpreting more languages than are interpreted at the United Nations, if you can believe it. These interpreters have given generously of their time and talent, and we thank them and all the technical team working with them. Thank you. We thank the production and technical team and the communications team, including both professionals and student assistants, and the other volunteers and professionals too numerous to mention who have helped behind the scenes to make this symposium a success. We want to thank as well the organizing committee, chaired by our own Professor Elizabeth Clark, who has been assisted by many others, with very special thanks to all who have arranged travel, accommodation, meals, and logistics. Thank you. We thank the incredible staff, professors, and dean of the law school who have facilitated this event taking place in the law school. Now we want to thank a special group, the members of our International Advisory Council, whose contributions and friendship, advice, and financial support make our work possible. Many would realize who are familiar with the way universities work in the United States, but many of you may not realize that universities depend greatly on individual donations from people who want to support the work of universities. Our International Advisory Council includes people who not only support us financially, but support us in so many other ways. They help with you could use the comparison of these are like the guests who volunteer to help do the dishes after dinner. They will do anything to help us, and we're so grateful for them. I'd just like you to know that they're among us, and if they could stand, those who are here, let's acknowledge them. finally, we want to thank all of you. Without you, this would not be possible, and of course, you are the special essence of what makes this symposium so successful. So thanks to you for taking your time and spending your days with us here. Thank you very much. Now, after this session concludes, we ask you to go directly to the vans and go to the hotel. That's because we need to get started. You need to be able, many of you are going to try to get some of your things in order at the hotel. We want you to dress comfortably. You can dress in casual attire for dinner. Dinner will be at 6:30 in the hotel. I want to highlight for you especially that there will be announcements at the hotel at the dinner concerning your luggage and your return journeys and how you get to the different locations you're going to. So it's important, don't miss the first part of the dinner because you'll want to be part of those announcements and find out what we have to say. Now, let's turn to the program of this session. We've had a chance, each of us, I think, in our hearts, in our minds, to reflect on this experience. And each of us takes away something. I've found over the years that it's really helpful to make a note or two about what you've learned and what you intend to do about it. Otherwise, sometimes these events, we could say, well, hasn't this been a great Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, but by Friday, we forget. We want you to be able to strengthen your understanding and reflect personally and individually about what you take away from this experience. We've invited a very distinguished and special group of people to help us to reflect better by sharing their own personal reflections as we finish this conference, this symposium. After they're finished, we'll be pleased to hear from our director, Brett G. Scharffs, and then from the head of our organizing committee, my friend and colleague, Professor Elizabeth A. Clark. And then we will finish this session. Thank you so much for your attention. Let me mention now and call up, if they would come one by one in this order, please. We want to hear from Wilfred Domingo, General Secretary of the Zimbabwe Council of Churches. He will be followed by Paulina Corominas, Chief of the Civil Society Relations Section of the Secretariat for Access to Rights and Equity of the Organization of American States. Then we will hear from our friend, Professor Bata Mishigish, Chair of the Department of Religious Studies at the Institute of Philosophy of the Mongolian Academy of Sciences. He will be followed by Henriette Hutabarat Lebang, President of the World Council of Churches, Indonesia. And finally, we're pleased to have Chairman Ramin Mamadov, Chairman of the State Committee on Affairs with Religious Associations of the Republic of Azerbaijan. We'll go to that point. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this symposium. A wonderful, wonderful time when we had an opportunity to have this important conversation on religious freedom and peace building. In a few minutes, I just want to share my reflections and my takeaways from this symposium. One of the major things that came out clearly to me is that there cannot be durable peace without religious freedom. And in the discussions and the presentation that took place over the past 2 days, the example of UAE, where religions are coming together and being an example of how religions can coexist, which can even be an example to how we can promote peace in our countries and in the world. Our religion must help us to love one another and not to judge and even to hate each other. And that's one of the things that really came out in these discussions. And I just want to conclude my reflection by sharing with you that religious freedom, from what I got, is the cornerstone of a free and just society. It allows individuals to live according to their beliefs. It fosters diversity and tolerance and contributes to the overall well-being of communities. Protecting this fundamental right is essential for ensuring that all people can live with dignity and respect. The second thing that came out clearly is that religion is a powerful catalyst for peace, since many religious traditions emphasize values which can inspire individuals and communities to work towards resolving conflicts and building a more harmonious world. However, while religion can be a force for peace, it also came out that it is associated with conflict in some cases. Hence, there is still need for us to promote interfaith understanding, tolerance, responsible religious leadership, and to harness the peacemaking and peace-building potential of religion. And as a religious leader, the assignment that I'm taking home myself as an individual from this symposium is to go and promote interfaith dialogue and initiatives in Zimbabwe and also in Africa, where I come from. And as I conclude, I was reflecting on the conversations that were going on here. And I was reminded of a story of a professor who asked his students the question, how do you tell that it's now daytime, night is over? One of the students stood up and said, Prof, when I see a goat and a sheep from a distance of 100 meters and be able to tell that that's a sheep, that's a goat, then for me it's daytime. And the professor said no. The second student stood up and said, when I see a sycamore tree from a distance of 100 meters and be able to tell that that's a sycamore tree, for me, it's now daytime, night is over. And the professor again said no. And the students were now anxious and asked, so tell us the answer. And the professor said, when you look at another person seated next to you and start to appreciate that that person deserves to be respected, and that person deserves to be liked, despite your differences, despite the differences of your background, despite even the differences in your religion, it's daytime, night is over. I thank you.
Agradezco el enorme honor de dirigirme a esta.
I would like to thank this wonderful audience, and I'm pleased to share with you all my reflections regarding this very important symposium. First, I would like to acknowledge the attentions and hospitality from our hosts, and also for the great organization of this beautiful event, which is not a minor thing. In fact, this is the foundation not only of a very successful event, but also for the future. This is what's allowed all of us to share some time and to feel welcomed and at home. This has allowed us to get to know each other better in a warm and safe environment, and for us to create new friendships, and even relationships with people from different walks of life and from other parts of the world, not only with religions, beliefs, or different spiritualities, but also, and in some occasions, with convictions completely different than ours. This is completely shown in the beautiful plenary session that we had this afternoon. I really would like to congratulate you for the organization of this symposium and for keeping us and for uniting us on this space. To everyone gathered here, we're all gathered here on the conviction of the importance of religious freedom and belief, like the understanding of the importance of tolerance and respect between among differences. I am sure that we've learned much from each other on the technical side, on the spiritual side, and on the personal end. To me, I would have loved to be able to split in two, three, or four to be able to listen to all the presentations. The university will facilitate recordings of these beautiful presentations and all the sessions, not only to us, the participants, but to any person interested in this matter and learning about this. Like in other sessions was mentioned, study and knowledge are fundamental to achieve this religious freedom and move forward. It's a very wide and broad subject which requires reflection and ongoing dialogue. That's why it is so important that we keep moving forward and promoting spaces like this. I am very, very impressed with new learnings and reflections and with interpersonal connections to be able to do so and keep working on inclusivity. Thank you very much, everyone.
Dear brothers and sisters in different faith, in different religions, and different traditions, in different cultures, it is a great honor to be part of this International Law and Religion Symposium. And on behalf of Mongolian delegation, I would like to thank very much to the International Center for Law and Religion Studies and BYU Provo, and all the supporters and all the friends who have come here to express their genuine interest in building peace through promoting religious freedom and human rights as well. So we have learned so much from each other, especially how to build this network, and as well as to use this network for making this world a better place. Again, by promoting religious freedom and human rights and democracy. And one thing that I would like to highlight is the importance of having diversity in unity. We are so diverse in many ways, but we can come together unified humanity, especially when it comes to peace building, peacekeeping, and promoting peace at individual level, at national level, as well as globally. That's what we want, and that's what we want to pursue in the future, but collectively, not individually. That's why we have to work together in the future, in the coming years, especially if we want to build a better place for our next generation. That's very important. So I would like to thank you all again, once again, very much for being part of this and coming together, highlighting the importance of building peace. Thank you very much.
dear friends, this is indeed one of the enriching experiences, inspiring experiences, meeting you friends coming from different involvement, different profession, but with a common concern for promoting peace, religious freedom, and peace. I think, as we have heard for these few days, we have a big task ahead of us. We have big challenges in front of us. But I think we do all believe that we have hope. The core of our religions giving us hope that we can hold hands together, moving together, strengthen each other, especially in the time of difficulty, in the time of facing great challenges. And I think this is our hope. And as we go home, I think this is the hope that we are going to share with friends in wherever we come from, and try to build the network so that not only we are more than 100, I think, in this symposium, not only more 100s, but will be multiply people, numbers of people who will share the same concerns. So I would like to, on behalf of the delegations from Indonesia, to express our deep appreciation to the organizer of this symposium. Everything goes so well. Preparation, many months before the communications has been established, which make our way easier. One important experience for me, and I think for some of us, there is a saying in Indonesian language, not know, not love. Tidak sayang, tidak tahu, tidak kenal, maka tidak sayang. And I think coming here to Utah, especially in the midst of this university and also the church, for the first time, I'm encounter with the church directly. And I think that is a big experience and also big knowledge. And I do hope also we'll overcome some of the prejudices we have against each other. And important, the meeting of this kind is very also important as we come together to overcome some of the prejudices that have been socialized into our mind. And unless we are ready to open ourselves to learn from the differences, I think we cannot move. But if we can learn, then we can move together and understand each other much better. Thank you.
The last speaker has just one option: speak briefly. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really honored to be amongst you as participants of the 31st Annual International Law and Religion Symposium. I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to our hosts, Brigham Young University and Sterling Foundation, for the excellent organization of the conference and all the arrangements that made the trip amazing, joyful, and insightful at the same time. This is my first participation at the symposium, and I'm glad we are not leaving empty-handed, since a part of a bunch of impressions we have from this trip, we've got concrete outcomes that pave the way of lasting cooperation between the State Committee on Affairs with Religious Associations of Azerbaijan and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and all related institutions. Thus, yesterday, the Memorandum of Understanding between the BYU and the Azerbaijan Institute of Theology was signed, as we joked with Honorable Dr. Scott Miller, Dean of College of Humanities. Now we have understanding also on paper. The MOU has laid the groundwork of our collaboration in the field of education. Besides, this is the reflection of our multifaceted cooperation with the Church, and in this context, as I mentioned in my speech at the breakout session yesterday, recent registration of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Azerbaijan is a cornerstone of our future joint efforts in building peace through interreligious dialogue. We are truly thankful to our hosts for creating such an outstanding platform that brings together representatives of all global confessions and communities. As it was half-jokingly said during the opening session, this platform may be considered as a copy-paste of the United Nations. But who knows? In this case, a copy may be much better than original, at least in terms of variety of language services rendered here during the conference. We are convinced that the symposium is a brilliant example of mutual understanding and peaceful dialogue on religious issues without any prejudice, labels, and one-sided approach. Our only wish is to keep this platform vital, and I express our firm readiness to contribute to further development of the symposium. We are immensely grateful to the Brigham Young University for inviting us to the symposium and such a hospitality that made us to feel ourselves homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for each of those beautiful reflections. We are now pleased to hear from Professor Scharffs, followed by Professor Clark.
Good afternoon. I'm deeply grateful to everyone who has spoken at this year's symposium. I don't dare try to highlight the highlights, because for me, every presentation I've heard and others I've heard about are a highlight. I will say I was deeply moved by Dr. Katrina Lantos Sweat's somber reminder of the one-year anniversary of the massacres of October 7th, the tsunami of hatred they unleashed, and her reminder that human dignity is the foundation of the entire architecture of human rights. I was also moved by Rabbi David Saperstein's acknowledgement that the lives of everyone in Palestine, Gaza, Lebanon, all those lives lost are tragedies. Dr. Sweat spoke about the words of her father, Congressman Tom Lantos, a Holocaust survivor and member of Congress who is remembered for his advocacy of human rights, including freedom of religion. Dr. Lantos, who now leads the foundation that bears his name, said when she felt discouragement or despair, she could hear her father's voice in his pronounced Hungarian accent saying, in his Hungarian accent, saying, "Don't worry, darling. We are at a windy corner of history, but blue skies are around the corner." My apologies if I'm not remembering the exact words. I'd like to conclude by talking for a few minutes about the blue skies around the corner. I hope you will indulge me for a few minutes as I speak rather personally and from the heart. For me as an individual, one of the most sacred passages of Scripture, one to which I turn at times of discouragement or melancholy, is section 11 of the Doctrine and Covenants, a revelation given by name to my great-great-grandfather, Hiram Smith, from his brother, the prophet of the Restoration, Joseph Smith. Verses 12 through 13 read as follows. "And now, verily, verily, I say unto thee, Hiram." And here I insert my own name, Brett. "Put your trust in that Spirit which leadeth to do good, yea, to do justly, to walk humbly, to judge righteously. And this is my spirit. Verily, verily, I say unto you, Brett, I will impart unto you of my Spirit, which shall enlighten your mind and which shall fill your soul with joy. Lately, I've been thinking about what it means to have our minds enlightened and our souls filled with joy. In the Book of Mormon, 2 Nephi chapter 2, there is an interesting scripture that I've come to understand in a very different way recently. 2 Nephi 2:25 says, Adam fell that men might be, and men are that they might have joy. For years, I thought this scripture was talking about the joy that would come to the righteous in the afterlife, after we've departed this vale of tears. But recently, I've been thinking about this differently. Recall with me the story of Adam and Eve after they have transgressed and have been expelled from the Garden of Eden. In a Latter-day Saint scriptural account, after they are cast out of Eden, Adam and Eve are taught the gospel, and Adam says, Blessed be the name of God, for because of my transgression, my eyes are opened, and in this life I shall have joy. And Eve responds saying, Were it not for our transgression, we should never have known good and evil, and the joy of our redemption, and the eternal life which God giveth unto all the obedient. It is only after being expelled from the Garden of Eden, with the knowledge of good and evil, and experiencing the entire spectrum of life's suffering, only after their eyes had been opened that it became possible for Adam and Eve, and likewise for us, to experience joy in this life as well as in the life to come. Joy, as spoken of here, I think, is something different than pleasure, or even happiness understood as a state of well-being and contentment. Recently, I was listening to an interview of the Australian musician Nick Cave, who early in his career was known as a, quote, master of melancholy, and had a reputation as punk rock's prince of darkness, filled with gothic nihilism. As Nick Cave described it, quote, I think I was like most young people. The default setting was, the world sucked, and people sucked. It all sucked. Later, Nick Cave lost 2 of his sons. One fell to his death at age 15, and another died at age 22. And he described his earlier view as, quote, an extraordinarily indulgent position. And it's a position held, I think, by people that are not yet to be truly broken. Cave described his more recent music as a kind of, quote, repositioning of myself in the world due to the death of my son. In response to the real trauma he had experienced, Nick Cave described how he was, quote, able to turn around and look at the world and see that we are part of a common sort of river of suffering. He explained further, I don't mean that in a gloomy way. We are just part of the brokenness of the world, and we recognize ourselves in each other. And therein lies the beauty of things. Cave explains that this led to a kind of epiphany that made it possible for him to experience a long, dormant emotion. In his song, Joy, Cave sings, we have all had too much sorrow. Now is the time for joy. As I understand what he's saying, joy comes in understanding the whole range of human experience, both the good and the bad, the happy and the sad, the world's and our own brokenness, and being able to reflect upon the shared human condition as deeply beautiful, opening the window to a type of joy that is not possible to those who have not experienced genuine suffering. This idea of a sublime, though hard-earned joy was reinforced recently in a story I heard about one of the world's leading producers of classical music, Adam Abeshouse, who was dying of cancer. Abeshouse, who was only 63, had a reputation for being deeply devoted to his clients. As Abeshouse describes it, quote, "I was devoted to them. From the devotion to the clients, I developed this theory that the best thing I could do for my clients is to make them feel safe and loved and create an atmosphere in the recording session to do their best." In August of this year, Abeshouse was told by his doctors that he had only a few weeks to live. One of his clients, the pianist Laura Downs, organized an at-home concert by the musicians he'd worked with so closely for decades. These famous musicians gathered from around the world in the studio adjacent to Abeshouse's home to play a private concert for Abeshouse, who listened in a wheelchair as his clients and colleagues, who had become his friends, played for him, each embracing him after performing. Over the course of the concert, nearly a dozen musicians played for Adam Abeshouse. He said, quote, "This is more than I could have ever dreamed. All these musicians are coming to play for me. It's a kind of miracle." The writer of the story concluded, quote, "A musical miracle to bid a classical luminary God's speed. At least for one afternoon, joy supplanted pain." Think of the joy described in this story, the joy in friends coming to console and celebrate their gratitude and love for their producer, who had become their friend. They were there with Adam Abeshouse in his home, sharing their love of music and their gratitude. And in that moment, joy supplanted pain. This is the kind of joy that we hope our gathering together to discuss religious freedom and its role in peacemaking can have for each of us. We cannot erase or eradicate the pain and suffering in the world, but we understand that it is in standing up for each other and in standing with each other that peace becomes possible. In our own lives, in our homes and families, in our places of work, in our communities and nations, and even in the world. Over the past few days, I've been thinking of what some of the adjacent concepts are that lie in close proximity to joy. On the one hand, I think these include things like depth, suffering, patience, empathy, compassion, and love. And on the other hand, peace, peaceableness, becoming peacemakers, along with concepts such as belonging, covenant community, faith, hope, and charity. Again, love for God and for our fellow human beings. I've also been thinking about concepts or ideas that are distant from or far removed from joy. These include, on the one hand, things like contention, doubt, fear, anger, and contempt. And on the other hand, indifference, despair, hopelessness, and nihilism. If we strive to become peacemakers who exude a deep and abiding joy, I think we will find ourselves in proximity to the things on the first list, like deep empathy, compassion, and peaceableness, and manage to distance ourselves from the things on the second list, contention, contempt, indifference, and despair. I've come to believe that life is beautiful, not because we put on rose-colored glasses, but because we see life in the words of Matthew Arnold, the English poet and essayist, as did Sophocles, quote, who saw life steadily and saw it whole. Joy is possible not because of the absence of pain, but because we are part of what Nick Cave described as the river of suffering that we experience together in empathy and love. Because when we show up for each other, as his clients did for Adam Abe's house, joy can supplant pain. Because we can gather, as we have done these past 3 days, in a spirit of learning and love, and listen deeply to each other. And because of the promise of better things to come, spoken of by the prophet Isaiah, and the high priest of good things to come, spoken of by the apostle Paul. I take comfort in the injunction to be still and know that I am God, recorded in Psalms 46:10, made by one who was with his friends when the raging sea threatened to swallow them, and in their exceeding fear he could tell them and us, as well as to the sea, to be still. And as recorded in the Gospel of Mark, the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. On Sunday evening, as we began this symposium, I quoted the words of Abinadi in Mosiah 15:17. How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of those who shall hereafter publish peace. Yea, from this time, henceforth, and forever. As we prepare to return to our homes from this mountain refuge, how beautiful are the feet of those who have stood before us over the past 3 days, proclaiming and publishing messages of peace, messages that we hope will go forth with a confident joy from this time, henceforth, and forever. Thank you, fare thee well, and God bless us, everyone.
Thank you, Brett. And thanks to all of you for being here, for enriching us and each other, and for the great work that you have done and will do. You know, the other day, I was driving down a major road in Provo. Now, you've seen Provo, and major roads still aren't that big. But it had 4 lanes, because roads in Provo tend to be fairly wide. And there's construction going on. So one of the lanes was blocked off, 3 of the lanes had cones. You had to sort of move your car across the intersection. So I followed my lane, started going down the lane. Cones are on either side of me. I'm doing great. Driving along, and I see a car coming straight at me. And I'm thinking, why in the world is somebody driving in my lane? And I was like, what a stupid driver. My children are sitting next to me and they're like, Mom, you're in the wrong lane. Yeah, so I guess who's the stupid driver there? I couldn't see the car. I mean, I could see the car, but I couldn't see the solution, and I couldn't see that I was the problem. And I think we all see challenges in our world, right? We see intolerant nationalism. We see a need for stable and prosperous societies. We see violent extremism. We see discriminatory or unjust treatment of our co-religionists or people of our ethnicity. But we don't always see the solution. And rarely, I think, we see that the problem sometimes might well involve us. It's not always, of course. There are bullies everywhere, from playgrounds to the world stage. And we see what they do and weep. But sometimes the problem is us. Except, of course, me, when I'm in conversation with somebody, and then I'm never wrong. So what do I mean when I say the problem is us? Right? You think, no, we're acting according to the best knowledge we have, trying to be moral, not perfect, but trying to do the right thing. So let me give an example of what I'm talking about. This scenario usually starts with someone being afraid. Maybe they're afraid of extremists, afraid of a lack of harmony in society or new religious groups, or afraid that our political, religious, cultural rivals or people we see as threatening might do something that will harm us or harm our society, right? They'll displace people from jobs, take away our religious followers, interfere with an election, undermine our stability and security, you name it, right? I'm not, across all political spectrums and all countries, I think people have things they're afraid of. And sometimes that fear gives us the justification for doing something we normally wouldn't do. So we may bend the rules or violate laws or do whatever we feel we need to do to make sure that these threats from our opponents are going to be taken care of. And we feel completely justified. We may be justified in being harsh or rude because, of course, the person we're talking with is so misguided. They should know. We also sometimes are justified in having excessive controls on our citizens or minority groups because, of course, they might engage in terrorism or violence. Or we're justified in preemptive or disproportionate attacks on other countries because of our enemies' potential for harm. But of course, those we see as our enemies or our rivals see our actions, and that provides them with all the justification they need to go and do the things that we were actually afraid of. Because as they commit violence or other unsocial activities, they can say, well, look, you've done this. This completely justifies it. Over time, this opposition gets more and more entrenched, exacerbated, where you can have a whole long list of things that the other person or other side has done. There's some great historians that have written about this over and over again in different societies, particularly, and I was reading on, about religious security issues and national security. Sociologists call this phenomenon polarization amplification. People get more and more polarized, and it ramps up and up and up. And as you heard, I mean, descriptions of this in our keynote session and elsewhere, right? People said we too often match hate with hate, or we tend to follow the rule of doing unto others as they have done unto us. So maybe you're thinking, oh, that's fine, Elizabeth. But you're just being relativistic, right? You're trying to water down people who are really culpable and try and make everybody guilty. And that's just not accurate. And I'll agree, that's not. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying there's a false equivalence that all sides and all actors and all problems are equally guilty. But what I am saying? I'm saying that when we justify deviating from the standards of the rule of law, when we justify ourselves in something shabby or something petty or something wrong, that's when we become part of the problem. But I think the good news is, when you are part of the problem, or I am part of the problem, is that we have some control. We can change. We can, in the words of Ambassador Jahan, get off the wrong train. Come back, preferably sooner rather than later, so it won't be too expensive. You know, there's wonderful examples of this worldwide, but I always think of Nelson Mandela, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who both fought against the apartheid system in South Africa. You know, they could easily have felt justified for returning hate for hate or injustice for injustice. The level of injustice that was done to them, that was done to Black South Africans, was horrific. But they didn't. Nelson Mandela, for example, reached out to learn about white South Africans, to connect with them. He conquered his fear. We often think of fear in terms of like fighting in a war, but the most difficult courage sometimes is the courage to overcome our fear in ourselves. He said, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he that conquers that fear. Right? If we can get past our feelings of fear from each other, then we can see each other as children of God, see each other as brothers and sisters, see each other as real people that go beyond a label of a party or a religion or an ethnicity. Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu refused to be resentful. Nelson Mandela once said, resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies. A wise man. But it's important to know that they weren't naive about their opponents. This doesn't involve some kind of wishful thinking that people who you're interacting with may change just because you're doing the right thing. Desmond Tutu, who started the Truth and Reconciliation procedure there that was a model for so many other countries, said this: forgiving and being reconciled to our enemies and of our loved ones are not about pretending that things are other than they are. It's not about patting each other on the back and turning a blind eye to the wrong. True reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the hurt, the truth. It could even sometimes make things worse. It's a risky undertaking, but in the end, it's worthwhile, because in the end, only honest confrontation with reality can bring real healing. Superficial reconciliation can bring only superficial healing. I think this ties in with the points that Brett was making. People like Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu are the kind of people who are sometimes referred to as repairers of the breach. Right? This is a term that maybe isn't an everyday term, but it comes from the book of Isaiah in chapter 58. God is making a promise to his people about the future. He says, and they that shall be of thee, the future's generation, shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in, someone who fixes broken things. The context for this, though, is about as interesting as the promise. The context, where Isaiah is describing it, isn't just some abstract promise floating out there. He's describing it to people who help others at a sacrifice to themselves. He talks about fasting, but those who fast not to appear self-righteous or show off to others. God asks, is this not the fast I have chosen? To loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens and let the oppressed go free, and that you break every yoke? Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house? When thou seest them naked, and thou coverest them, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh? Thinking of this reminds me of my wonderful Muslim friends and fasting at Ramadan and caring for the poor and bringing them in for an iftar. And so many of you in the work that you do in standing together, speaking up for the oppressed or the poor or the hungry. Repairers of the breach are people who understand what our keynote speaker taught. It's not justice to me unless it's justice to thee. Repairers of the breach are people who embody the exact opposite of where I started with this discussion, justifying violations of law and morality based on others' actions or fear of others' actions. To the contrary, these are people willing to build up others even at a sacrifice to themselves. Their lives of holiness move them to think beyond their own interests. I'm sure all of you can think of people in your religious tradition who embody this for you. You know, most of us, as Jacqueline Neo said, want to know who is building our bus stop. Repairers of the breach are the people who ask, who am I building a bus stop for? So, why does religious freedom promote peace? Ultimately, because it is the only thing that has the power to give us the inner transformation we need to be able to change the world outside of us. The Dalai Lama taught, we can never obtain peace in the outer world unless we make peace with ourselves. When we're at peace with ourselves, we have the power to act out of principle instead of out of fear. When we're at peace with ourselves, we have the power to bring healing instead of resentment. When we're at peace with ourselves, we have the power to sacrifice to meet others' needs. When we're at peace with ourselves, we become repairers of the breach. May we all become repairers of the breach with the help of each other and our God. Thank you.
Thank you to all who have participated in this splendid closing session. We'll now ask you again to move quickly to the buses, to the vans, to get back to the hotel so that you have time, and then come to the dinner at 6:30. Would you please remember also your headphones, the translation devices, would you please leave them outside as you go? Don't put them in your luggage. Thank you.